very, very big believer in blockchain, and the technology is just so good. It's going to change the way we buy and sell things. We wanted to do products, Bitcoin products, Ethereum products, but it's very unregulated. I like being on the podium. I don't want to be 8th or 9th in anything you do. You want to be top 3. You've got to sort of tell a story about why you're doing stuff and why it's going to work, and motivate people to come along a journey with you.
What's some key learnings for the listeners if they're thinking about building their career?
Oh, look, it's...
Private markets investments are investors can find some real value. I find the best way to learn is learn from someone who's done it before and given it a go. Hi, I'm Travis Miller, host of Grow Your Wealth podcast. Thanks for joining me here today. On these podcast sessions, we're going to talk through how certain investors have navigated the bumpy road of investing, whether it be through business or investments in general. Thanks for listening today. Welcome to another episode of the Grow Your Wealth podcast, where we explore the strategies and stories of financial success. I'm your host, Travis Miller, and today we have a very special guest, Drew Bradford, a seasoned finance executive whose impressive career has spanned more than 30 years across global financial markets, and he's now pioneering the blockchain and cryptocurrency space. Drew's journey began in traditional banking and finance, where he built a solid foundation working at esteemed institutions such as Bankers Trust, Deutsche Bank and NAB, managing financial markets across Europe, Asia and the Americas. His deep-rooted relationships and a strategic acumen propelled him to significant leadership roles, and now Drew is Director of Special Operations at Jelly C, where he's dedicated to driving innovation and embracing disruptive technologies in the blockchain and cryptocurrency space. Today, Drew will share his wealth of experience and discuss the evolving landscape of global markets, strategic decision-making and practical insights for both seasoned investors and newcomers alike. Let's dive in and learn how to grow our wealth with expertise of a true market veteran. Drew, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Travis. You're too kind.
It's good to have a chat. We overlap with lots of our colleagues, friends.
Absolutely.
It's a very similar background.
There's plenty of integrated history there.
Never caught up that often. Okay, can we start at the beginning? Just want to give us a bit of a potted summary of who you are and what you're currently focused on.
Who I am, as you mentioned, I've 30 years, 3 institutions. I did a little over a decade at Bankers Trust. That was sold to Deutsche Bank about 25 years ago. 25 years ago next Tuesday, 4th of June 1999.
Gotcha.
12 years at Deutsche Bank, mostly in London, but 3 years in Japan. And I came back to Australia in 2011 and ran financial markets at NAB from 11 till about a year ago, April 2023, and dive full speed into the blockchain space for the last 12 months, and working on 2 or 3 different things at the moment in that space. I'm a very, very big believer in blockchain, and the technology is just so good. It's going to change the way we buy and sell things, the way we settle things, the way we account for things. So, that's the current.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's an interesting story, going from probably traditional banking career and quite senior banking career to ultimately make the jump to be an entrepreneur, and not only entrepreneur in a sort of something that's relatively groundbreaking, particularly for Australia, in the crypto space.
Yeah.
What was the thinking behind that leap?
Oh, the thinking was behind the leap, literally. So I get banks are not wanting to. We were experimenting at NAB. We developed a stable coin. We wanted to do products, Bitcoin products, Ethereum products, but it's very unregulated. And banks, not only National Australia Bank, but all the banks, they deal in the regulated space. It is very difficult for them to allocate capital, allocate time, resourcing into the blockchain space whilst it's not regulated. So I think there's an opportunity to get into that space ahead of what you will see, what I assume will eventually happen, is the traditional institutions will come into the space once the regulations are clear and it's safe for them to do so. So opportunity for those who want to be entrepreneurial between now and then.
Gotcha. Sounds like your background deal with regulators will help you dealing with regulators in the current run.
It is. I'm knocking on the same doors. And so it's great to have the established relationships with ASIC and APRA. And they have been actually really, really helpful, and they love the fact that we're coming and talking to them as opposed to doing something in a garage and surprising them.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure the regulator love you're up front, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Straight up talking about what you're up to rather than sneaking around the back door, which no one likes. Now, a lot of our listeners like the backstory. Do you want to just talk us through your education and early days?
Oh, early days, I had had a spoilt childhood. My father was a pilot in the Air Force, so we moved around a lot. I did about 12 different schools all over Australia. On Air Force bases up in Southeast Asia. We moved pretty much every year. So that was a heap of fun. And literally, boys' own adventure growing up on Air Force bases, it was a heap of fun. Came back to Canberra to do year 11 and 12 and uni down in Canberra. So I started off doing an engineering degree and then went and did a vacation job and looked at, there was a whole lot of 40-year-old engineering guys sitting beside me doing stuff that I didn't want to do when I was 40. And I sort of went home and scratched my head. My father was still in Malaysia, went up to Malaysia, and a friend of his worked at Citibank.
Gotcha.
He took me into a dealing room in Singapore, and I thought, that's what I want to do.
Gotcha.
It was just so obvious to me. I didn't want to work in a mine. I wanted to be there. I wanted to work in a dealing room. Switched over to economics. Did that. Applied for a bunch of banks. And this was my last year of uni was 1986.
Gotcha.
And that is when Australia opened up the banking system. 26 new banks came into Australia. So timing was great. Applied to all of them and got offered a job as a graduate with Bankers Trust, which I had no idea who they were, but it was one of those, better to be lucky than good, and took that job as opposed to a Westpac job or some of the other banks. SecPac don't exist anymore.
Never heard of them.
And so not that Bankers Trust exists anymore, but it was just a great environment for that. That 12 years from 87 to 1999, they were such a innovative firm, particularly in the derivatives space. And it was a I won't say unregulated environment, but you had a lot more flexibility on product development. And we just did stuff that you cannot do today. On product innovation. It was an awesome time.
Yeah, it's interesting, but you hear a lot of it. I just missed the BT era, but you hear a lot of people that love working there and a lot of people that went on to very successful careers. So something went on there that was obviously a bit different.
Oh, yeah, it was. It's hard to work out, but something was different. I just connected, they brought in 25 grads in my year and, they were bringing 25, 21-year-olds in each year. So you had an environment where you all wanted to work hard together. We all worked together, went out together, did everything together. We'd go down to, have drinks after work, come back to the office, do more coding, do more stuff, back out again. It was very, very tight, very, very collegiate. And I'm still friends with a lot of those people today.
I was going to say, how important is that networking, banking and finance? And even now in your new role, right, your old connections and friends must be critical.
Oh, totally. And those people, as you said, those people went everywhere. When I went over to Deutsche in London in 1999, I thought, geez, and I just left. I was at Bankers Trust New Zealand. We had a dealing room with 40 people in it. I turned up in London. They said, oh, there's your seat. And there's 1,000 people in the dealing room. And they said, oh, this is FX and commodities. Upstairs is rates and credit. There's another 1,000 people in that dealing room. Equities is the next level up. Another 1,000 people. It's like, how do you get connected?
Yeah.
Day one, they say, oh, look, we're having problems with More Capital. Oh, guess what? The guy who does all the trading at More Capital is an ex-BT guy. The guy who does all the trading at Goldman Sachs Asset Management, ex-BT guy.
Gotcha.
So oh, great. I can add some value here through that BT diaspora.
Yeah, Aussies, they get their way around, don't they, in the global scale?
Oh, look, being Australian, particularly in Europe, you're not offensive to anybody. They like you. And I was given jobs. Like, one of the I've transitioned from a trading role. My first role was running FX trading for Deutsche in London, and then I ended up running sales across a few products across Europe. And the reason, the Germans didn't want a French guy to run European sales.
Gotcha.
None of the continental guys wanted an English guy to run it. They all hated the Americans. So even though I spoke no European languages, I ended up running sales for Europe because I literally, lucky again, least offensive person. But you can go in as an Australian, you can say g'day to anybody.
Yeah.
And
it makes sense. So I've run a number of sales teams. Hey, if you're enjoying this, please subscribe on whatever platform you're using. It helps us build a community. We want to educate investors, and this is what it's all about. And the biggest challenge is juggling these different personalities because they're all relatively ambitious. They're all sort of money and success driven, and they're all different. And so the person who's running it just has to be able to juggle different personalities, and juggling it in Europe must mean even harder, right? Different languages, different cultures.
It amazes me. You've got a country the size of Australia, and a Perth guy isn't that different from a Sydney guy, but you can go in Europe. Even in England, Europe, a French guy is very different from a German who's very different from an Italian, right? And they're all 100 miles from each other. It's amazing how culturally they are different.
It's good. Now, a couple of people have influenced you. Can you pull out, one or two or three? Even in early life, current life, who's turned the dial for you?
Early life, I remember when I was like a young bond trader at Bankers Trust, and I got the messy end of the curve. All that sort of when you start off at the cash dealers generally thing, and your whole aim is to work your way out the curve. And the guys who trade the long bonds get paid the most, so you had to work your way out. And I remember being in the 0 to 2 year space, which nobody wants. It was messy, and we hired a guy named John McFarlane who was he was an economist, so he knew a lot about the economy, and I had spent a few years on the futures floor, and so for me it was all about, the market feels bid or the market feels offered. But he took me through economics, and we had a very good economics team at Bankers Trust, and sitting beside JT, and then he moved over to New Zealand and was the country head in New Zealand. He said, I'll come over and run the markets business in New Zealand, so I came over there. When Deutsche took it over, he was very, okay, they don't even know that they've bought us, right? But we've got to put, let's get everyone and work out how we get all our team to have a great career at Deutsche Bank. And if you look at the people in Deutsche Bank globally that came out of Bankers Trust New Zealand, they all did pretty well.
Yeah,
and JT was very influential in how do you run a business and how do you create value and how do you look after your people. Yeah. It was awesome. Up until recently, he was on the board of ANZ. He went on to
so we're talking about that's that John we're talking about.
Yeah.
Wow.
So he was very influential early in my career. And I spent a few years in London. He ran Deutsche Tokyo, and he said, come over to Japan for a few years. You'll learn some stuff. So I went over to work with him and run FX and derivatives and interest rate markets over at Deutsche Tokyo for a few years.
Oh, that's a pretty good top. One of your top three?
Yeah, he was awesome. And it's hard at Deutsche. It's hard to say one individual, but there's an old saying that says if you're the smartest guy in the room, you're in the wrong room. I can't tell you how often I felt like the dumbest guy in the room when I was at Deutsche Bank. There was some people. One guy, Zara Amrolio, who was up until recently running a high-frequency market-making firm called XTX in London. But Zar was just an incredibly smart guy, superhuman IQ.
Gotcha.
He was just an awesome guy to be smart, and, we got to go that way. He wasn't great in getting everyone to go that way, but, geez, he knew which way to go.
That's really good.
He was awesome.
Yeah, you do make some unique intellect in the finance and banking world, but the most amazing ones that can pull together the intellect and the personality and the strategy. And so there's lots of people are good at one or two things. Yeah. The ones that can pull it all together are the ones that are amazing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Now, a couple of pivotal moments. Sounds like meeting John McFarlane was pretty interesting. How about a couple of pivotal moments in your ledger where you are today?
Oh, look, there's actually a few sliding doors moments, right? So, when JT moved over to New Zealand, and he said, come over and run financial markets, there was a whole lot of people saying, why are you going to New Zealand? Right? And it was a bit like, well, it was a bit of a thing. Do I stay and get basically go into the prop trading career path, which I really enjoyed? My wife hated the phone calls in the middle of the night. You've been stopped out of Dolly Ann again. But that was a big switch into a management role as opposed to a trading role. So that was a really big switch. And if I hadn't have been in New Zealand when Deutsche Bank bought Bankers Trust in 1999, I could have been anywhere. Probably would have gone to Macquarie Bank, which a lot of the trading guys did, but they had a whole lot of people sort of doing what I did anyway. So that's a bit, who knows what would have happened. But being in New Zealand, that launched me to Deutsche London and running around the world, which was just so much fun.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Like, I was Deutsche about 2003, 4 to 2008, 2009, something in that time frame.
Time.
Which was an awesome time pre-GFC, through GFC, post-GFC, right? But I do recall the New Zealand traders and the New Zealand business were held in very, very high regard.
Quite a bit of the
risk budget sat in New Zealand, and taking views on Aussie Kiwi, US Kiwi, all that sort of stuff. It was interesting.
Yeah, no, they were a really good crew, the Kiwis that came up through Deutsche.
Now, delve into the why. What drives you in business? And maybe even focus on today, right? Because a bit of a chat we had earlier.
Yeah.
You're clearly moving into an innovative space, and you're clearly very passionate about it. So, kind of, what drives you in general?
Oh, look, I like being on the podium. I don't want to be 8th or 9th in anything you do. You want to be top 3. And I think, the world is getting narrow. It rewards the top 1 or 2 in a space, and it doesn't reward, the also-rans. It's interesting as we globalise more, you get internet, artificial intelligence is going to accelerate this, that you get access to the best of everything pretty easily, so you don't have to get satisfied with an average product. I've looked at all the stuff that blockchain can do, and as I touched on earlier, banks aren't ready to play in the space because it's unregulated, right? So they can't. Sense. Right? It's too hard for them, and they will come in once it's very clear what blockchain is. And it'll get regulated in the new payments regulation that's going to go through in Australia in probably 2026. So it's 2 years before. But then I'm positive the banks will come in. If I look at the custodians, the way they buy and sell securities and manage the ledger that securities on, blockchain solves all those problems, and it will solve their tech stack problem. So there's an opportunity to be in that space. So what motivates me, there's an opportunity to get in. You can see a pot of gold waiting for somebody to go and pick it up. And there's a whole lot of reasons why your traditional industry can't go over and pick it up.
Gotcha.
So that's what's motivating.
Yeah. Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying this episode. If you want to learn more about alternative assets, there's a book here you can read, How You Grow Your Wealth with Alternative Assets. Now back to the episode. It's interesting. Like the book I wrote a number of years back now said 2 things in there. Said I'm not an expert on crypto. But I said I really like the technology because I can see what it can do. And I also mentioned if you're investing in it, you should be thinking about partnering with an expert, someone who understands trading and sort of managing and sort of running risk. But the technology absolutely is interesting. And I look at it to sort of simplify it to a degree. A lot of the problems in financial markets relate to a registry, just tracking who owns what, when they own it, when they sold it, whatever, right? And I can see blockchain can solve registry type problems, and then all the connections to that sort of are interesting. That's my observations.
Oh, totally. And think about this. If you look at it like a 3D Excel spreadsheet, if you look at an Excel spreadsheet, it's got a number in a cell, and you can put in a new number. In blockchain, you can see every number that's ever been in that cell.
Yeah.
And you can't change it. It's immutable. So it's like this 3D ledger system.
Yeah.
And, if you're storing the ownership of, NAB shares or Deutsche shares or who owns this bond, it's just so much better than what we currently have.
For sure. I do see it. Now, given the jump you've made, what advice would you give to someone going from a fairly traditional path? Often traditional paths, you get paid well, nice holidays, all sorts of things. What makes someone jump to be an entrepreneur, and what do they need to think about when they make that jump?
First thing you got to think about, you're not going to make any money for 2 years.
Spot on.
So you've got to be set up to make the jump. And when you leave a big firm, there's so much that just happens in a big firm that you've got to do yourself.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
But I'm becoming the IT guy. I'm there's a whole lot of stuff that I have very little experience in.
Yeah.
That you've got to do yourself. Lawyers cost a lot of money.
For sure.
You've got to hang up on them quickly because they're billing you every 6 minutes.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't want to chat about your weekend. I know the clock's running. So you've got to be careful about your money because I've got some great investors in the stablecoin that we're trying to set up, but I don't want to waste their money.
For sure.
So you're very, very conscious on doing it, being lean. But you've got to be set up you've got to be at the right time of your life to be able to take that risk. So mid-career people with 3 kids and school fees and stuff like that, that's a real challenge. I'm at a bit of a sweet spot where I'm kicking my kids out of the home, so I can take some risk.
Yeah, it is hard, that time frame thing. It's sort of, it's easy to take the risk when you've got your personal life in place.
Sorted.
It's those people that make that leap when they've still got the home front.
They amaze me.
I'm really jumping.
They amaze me, and there's people out there doing that, and hats off to them. That's a lot of courage.
It's all a bit of risk and return.
Yeah.
They've ramped up their risk. I hope they get their return as well.
Return.
Okay, a couple of things. What has worked for you? A couple of things that you look through and sort of that was a success for me.
Oh, look, I've always been pretty adaptable, and when you're working in teams, and I've worked around the world with German teams, Japanese teams, Italians, Middle East people when I was running around Europe. You've got to sort of tell a story about why you're doing stuff and why it's going to work.
Yep.
And motivate people to come along a journey with you. And if you get that bit right, people will come on the journey. Yeah. But you've got to have a good story about why everything you're doing, there's the why. Why are we doing that? Why do we want to be number one in the bond market? Why do we have to win these bond tenders? Yeah. People are saying, NAB are saying, we're not making any money. Trust me, you get there, we'll get something else over here, else over here.
Gotcha.
And if you're fourth, you won't.
Yeah, for sure. Particularly in Australia, but
particularly in Australia. But that's worked well. Create a story and motivate your people. Why being number one in the space will make them happy.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, it's one of those things, you tell someone to do something, but if you lead and explain why, they're more likely to follow.
Yeah, right? And why it's good for them.
Yeah,
how are they going to benefit? They might benefit from getting paid more. They might benefit from learning more. They might get benefit from, hey, I'll get a bigger job or something.
Yeah.
But let them know why they're going to benefit and how.
Makes sense. Looking from the outside in, I know a number of people in your background, I would say you've probably done well the networking, kind of building relationship contacts and working those networks, because your name pops up a lot just in the industry and a social environment, right? So I think that's a skill, particularly in Australia. If I was to throw something that at you that I think probably you've done well and worked well.
Oh, look, you've got to have friends.
Yeah,
right? And it's important to have that network. You can get stuff done.
For sure. Now, a couple of bumps in the road.
Oh,
when are things blown up, gone wrong?
Oh, look, there's always. But you're not a good derivative dealer if you haven't had a blow up. Oh, look, things have gone wrong, and it's when you haven't been focused. And I've always found if you cross your fingers and hope something happens, it doesn't.
Yeah.
You've got to be really focused. There's plenty of times, and there's times when, particularly at NAB, when you've tried to push the organisation faster than it wants to get pushed.
Yep.
And you can work out what you can do and what you can't do. And sometimes I've kept trying to do things that I thought's a good thing, but it's maybe not so good for NAB.
Yeah.
And better off while I'm going out and doing it by myself.
Yeah.
But I think it's not just NAB, Westpac, all those people who CBA who had a little push into blockchain, chosen to step back out. They're all going to be coming back in 2 years' time.
Gotcha. Yeah, and it's literally you just think it's waiting for the regulatory clarity.
Oh,
Effectively.
and look, they have to.
Yeah,
they have to.
And there's a capital element for them too, right?
Yeah, which is unclear.
Yeah.
You know, all that stuff's unclear.
Got you. If you had to throw some key learnings out there across your journey, it could be personal life, professional life. What's some key learnings for the listeners if they're thinking about building their career?
Oh, look, go hard.
Yeah.
You know, don't die wondering. Have a view on what you think is going to make whatever you do work. Differentiate yourself, right?
Yeah.
What am I going to do that's different from my competitors?
Gotcha.
How do I create an edge?
Yeah.
And whether that's you as a person, a strategy, why are people going to come to you
true.
rather than the guy beside you or the girl beside you?
For sure. Career differentiation, effectively.
Different career differentiation. Why you? And build on having a niche. Build on doing something differently.
You only think about the hiring process, and you would have hired a lot more people than me, but quite often you'll sit and look at 2 or 3 people and go, they're kind of the same. And there's such a subtle thing that tips you. It's sort of like they're kind of, they're involved in this social group, or they've played that sport, or they've read this book, or they've done this study. So kind of the differentiation is critical, because there's a lot of people that look exactly the same. Look and behave and act exactly the same. Not from a physical appearance, but just what's written down in their experience. So I get it.
Oh, I remember when I first joined Deutsche, we had a whole lot of people that came from all over the world, but in reality, they all looked a lot like me. They were sort of middle class, relatively well educated. We all thought the same.
Yeah, for sure.
And there was a lot of Marks and Johns, Andrews. And we did a whole reshuffle of the team. And this guy who I mentioned earlier, Zaram Rolia, came in, and we got rid of a few Darrens, Marks and Steves, and we hired some Nihals and some Nitans and some different things. Yeah. And boom, Deutsche Bank was their number 1 in FX for the next 10 years in a row.
Yeah,
but a diversified team that weren't, like I said, you can see a lot of people that all look the same, and you've got to have diversification that gets on.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, if you're enjoying this, please leave a review. It's really important to us. We're trying to build momentum around education, and better reviews will get more people coming and listening. Now, getting out of the personal definition of success. What do you think success look like?
Oh, look, it's winning. It's being on the podium. But, you've got to set what you think is the podium. I had a podium when I was at NAB. I had a mental podium when I was at Deutsche. I've got a mental podium now. I'm trying to build a stable coin. I want $1 billion in the stable coin. Jelly C, I'm working with them, the digital asset manager. We want 500 mil under management.
Gotcha.
Right? So those are, for me, you define your own success.
Yeah,
and pick your own benchmarks and then go for it.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, you've got to set those goals right. You're better off setting them and getting close, right? Setting ambitious goals and getting close and not achieving them. At least you've set an ambitious goal.
Oh, look,
it's easy.
If you get halfway there, it's okay.
Well, for example, you want $1 billion, right? You set a goal at 100, you could get 100, you go, well, that was okay. But you really want $1 billion.
Yeah,
you
but I don't want 10. 10's fail.
Yeah, gotcha. Somewhere in the middle. Now, again, a little bit philosophical. What legacy are you living and leaving?
Oh, 3 nice kids.
Gotcha.
Look, I've got 3 wonderful kids. I'm very lucky that, nothing's gone wrong with any of them, and they're great. I've had a lot of fun in markets, and that period that we both worked at Deutsche Bank was just a wonderful period. I feel a bit sorry for Deutsche Bank now. I feel sad, which is, but there was a golden period there, the early 2000s, up until actually it's probably around the European debt crisis of 11 and 12, where because Deutsche came out of the GFC pretty well.
Yeah, for sure, particularly Australia too. Right?
Yeah. But it was just post that, the European debt crisis, 2012, 13, where it lost its way a little bit.
I look back at that period. I was at Deutsche. It was a machine. It was a machine in rates, FX, and really in credit.
Credit.
They were really good in structured credit, vanilla credit, trading credit, all sorts, and they were miles ahead of anyone in Australia.
Oh, yeah. It was a wonderful organisation to work
Yeah.
for.
Very good. We're on to some quick round questions. Now, we're on to we've talked about your career. I want to hear about your first job, and I'm talking about the absolute first job, early days. What did you get up to?
Oh, look, I remember doing a few jobs when I was going through uni as a barman, but one that always remembered, I worked at a sleeping bag factory, and my job was to stuff the feathers into the different pockets of the sleeping bag. So I'm in Canberra, I'm in a tin shed, it's 40 degrees in summer, and I'm up to my neck in down trying to weigh 50 grams, because these were high-tech sleeping bags, and putting all this down feathers, and you used to get out, you'd be itchy as all get out, but you had to do it basically in your underpants or it was too hot.
Yeah, got you.
But yeah,
That's a pretty interesting one. That sounds like one of the
stuffing
worst.
sleeping bags with feathers.
Yeah, I did have at a work experience job. I had to get the cheese off the conveyor belt. Sorry, cheese out of a bucket and put it in a conveyor belt. And that was, they do that 2 weeks work experience when you're a kid. Year 10. I did that for 2 weeks, and I thought, I'm never ever coming back. I'm never eating cheese, and I'm never coming back here again. Oh, yeah. But at the end of the day, everyone's got to have a job, right? This stuff's got to get done. So
paid well.
Good on them. Yeah,
stuffing sleeping bags with feathers. Yeah, paid well.
Okay, piece of advice for your younger self, aside from not doing that job.
No, paid well. It did pay well.
Yeah.
Piece of advice for younger self: focus a little bit more. You can achieve a lot when you focus.
You agree? What motivates you most as a person?
Oh, look, I love winning. Like I touched on before, I love being on the podium. So you've got to set yourself up so you can, whatever you're doing. And I've been spoilt in my career. Bankers Trust, I was on the derivatives desk. They were number one in the world in derivatives. I had, 12 years at Deutsche Bank. 10 of those 12 years we were number one in the world in FX, and I was in the FX business. And that was fantastic. And, NAB, we got up from fourth of four in the markets business to the number one markets business, right? So very focused on what you got to do to differentiate and how to get on the podium.
Gotcha.
And I've got to do that for GLC and Catena, which is the stablecoin thing that I'm doing.
Just going to jump. I'm going to go off my fire questions. So think about that. You've said a number of times you like winning, you like being on the podium. Tell us a time, right, when you you didn't win, but you know you can. What do you do, right? You come second, you come third. You're sort of taking a hit, didn't get to where you wanted to be. How do you get back up and keep going?
Oh, yeah, there's a few times. When I came back from Japan at Deutsche, I ran the global, what they're called, listed derivatives business at Deutsche, which was all the futures exchanges and the equity options exchanges.
ETOs and stuff like that,
yeah. Around the world. And literally we made $200 million, 200 million euros a year out of that business. But Goldman Sachs made $1 billion, JP Morgan made $1 billion. It's like, what are they doing to make $1 billion that we're not?
Yeah.
That was frustrating for quite a while. And look, I never got there because I moved back to Australia. I got offered the job at NAB, and that was I don't know, it was a ticket home that I knew my wife wanted me to take.
Fair enough.
But, that's something I would have liked to have spent a few more years on because the size of the prize was $1 billion business, and we were making 200 million euros, so $300 million at the time.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think my take on it is you got to be resilient, right? Like, if you want to be on the podium, it's not easy to get there.
Oh, man,
so you
got to take easy, a few, like everyone would be doing.
The old saying. Yeah, you got to take your hits and move on.
Yeah.
Now, what are your tips for driving long-term wealth?
Oh, look, he's going to sound a little bit weird or not conventional. Don't diversify. And what I mean by that, you got to place some bets. What are the things that are going on at the moment? Usually we get one technological development every generation. So every 20, 30 years, 30 years ago we got the internet, and you had different things 30 years before that. We've got now blockchain and AI hitting at the same time, right? So you've got to take a disproportionate bet in your portfolio on AI / the blockchain space. And if you look at the compounded returns of the NASDAQ, the last 2-3 decades has been about 17%. S&P has been about 12%. Russell 2000's 8%.
Gotcha.
So if you go focus on what what's at the pointy end of what's going on at the moment, AI is actually going to force people. So more and more asset managers are going to use Copilot or whatever in their portfolio decisions. Their trustees are going to tell them to do that. And AI is going to say, well, why aren't you invested more in tech? Or why aren't you invested more in this? And why do you have this big, wide, diversified portfolio? Why don't you go here? It's going to drive money into the best performing assets around the world.
Yeah, true.
AI will do that. So you want to put your money in. I think you've got to have, here's my safe pot.
Yeah.
But maybe you had 5% in emerging markets or 5% in your alts. I think that percentage has to go up into the stuff because AI is going to direct money to where it's growing the fastest.
Makes sense.
And you look particularly if you look at the size of the GDP that's going, the emerging markets world is now more than 50% of the global GDP. So AI is going to direct money into EM. And people traditionally go, well, look, I'll have the last 5%.
Yeah.
But watch that space.
Yeah, it's not an unreasonable view, right? Like, kind of, it's a good way to think of it, right? A little bit different.
A little bit different. But
a little bit more concentrated.
AI for the next 5 years is going to literally change the world.
Yeah, so follow a thematic, I guess, to a degree.
Yeah, follow the thematic.
Now, the biggest mistakes people make could be the opposite, diversifying too much. But what do you think biggest mistakes in investing?
Well, biggest mistakes, people. I think being too diversified and actually not thinking about what do you really need to achieve. Like if you look at the debt in countries, the US has got the easiest to understand statistics, but the US debt grows at 8% a year. So you have to earn more than 8% a year because the value of the pool of US dollars is going up by 8% a year. So this is why houses are getting more expensive. It's actually because the value of what you're buying with them is worth less.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And so you think about that, 8% a year just to stand still. So you've got to think about how do I beat 8% plus inflation? And so you've got to be thinking north of 10.
Yeah.
And so you think, oh, my money's safe. At the cash rate at 4.35.
It's going backwards.
You are going backwards.
Yeah.
You are going backwards. And, the benchmark of that, particularly for everyone in Australia, is the property prices. And they're creeping up, but they're creeping up in terms of, because your Aussie dollar is actually slowly being slightly debased.
For sure. Yeah, it makes sense. When you're not working, how do you like to spend your time?
Oh, look, it's the Australian thing, and this is why I've got to go and get my skin cancers burnt off all the time. I love time at the beach.
Really?
I've got a beach house north of Sydney. I feel really relaxed there. I do a bad job of hitting a ball around a golf course, but I enjoy it.
Yeah.
So the beach and a bit of golf, running around the world. I love good food.
Yeah.
I love going out to good restaurants. I've got some friends that are a friend that used to work for me is now a food critic in London. So whenever I'm overseas, get her tips on what's the best restaurants to go to. Yeah. And so then you got to go to the gym and work that off.
It's like that, isn't it? You got to keep yourself healthy. Yeah, it's all part of it.
Absolutely.
Very good. If you're interested in connecting with Drew, you can connect with him on LinkedIn. We'll include the link in the show notes. But really appreciate you coming in for a chat. It's very interesting.
Great. Thanks, Travis.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Hey, if you're enjoying this, please leave a review. It's really important to us. We're trying to build momentum around education, and better reviews will get more people coming and listening.